Hi everyone, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here, and today we're going to take a look at something that I don't think I've done in a previous show here, but well, if I have, it hasn't been for a long time. Anyway, I'm going to take a look at a game played between a couple of computers, not even in an official event. It was there's a guy Martin Thorson who likes to run these engine matches, and this is a game from one of those. And it's just a really super cool game, and one that I think is especially great to take a look at for tactics practice. So in this game, Shredder 12 had white, Nom 4.2 was black, and away we go. So I don't really want to say anything about the opening. It's just a Nimzo Larsen of sorts, and well, okay, all standard stuff. I'll just basically get to where the action starts getting good, and that's pretty soon. Okay, so black played knight f to d7, and the reason to use this knight rather than the b knight is so that way when you take, if you take white's knight on e5, you don't have to worry about f takes e5 gaining a tempo against you. So, and the other knight can still go to c6 as well. So it's a reasonable approach. On the other hand, it's abandoning the king side, and white immediately tries to take advantage. So rook f3, with the idea of playing rook h3 and queen h5. Black plays g6, and now, okay, we already have our first little bit of fun here. Knight to g4, which threatens checkmate in one move by knight to h6. Black plays h5, which does take care of the threat, but it's also making the black king side a bit airier, to put it mildly. All right, white brought the knight back to e5, knight c6, takes, rook g3. Okay, so now the threat is to play queen takes h4. Queen takes h5, and all right, and now black played h4, more or less asking white what this rook is doing exactly. All right, so at this point, you might want to start really putting on your tactics thinking cap here and see what white to move should do. And really, both sides, of course, make a lot of extraordinary moves in this game. All right, well, white plays queen h5, threatening mate in 1 by queen to h8, and also threatening mate in 2 with rook takes g6, f takes g6, and then queen takes g6 mate. So black has to block the long diagonal. It's the only way. He can either play e5 or d4, and he chooses d4. Now, of course, white can play rook takes g6 and just make it a draw right away. But you know engines, I mean, if it's possible to delay a draw and to keep playing, they'll delay the draw and keep playing. So white made a kind of a goofy move here, which really should have no special significance, f5. Now, it has a threat, threatening to play f takes g6, and that'll obviously be quite dangerous. But if black were to play e takes f5, white would have nothing better than rook takes g6. It would more or less be forced. But what goes for white goes for black. Black sees that it can play h takes g3 and not get mated either. So why not? This is a draw. We'll at least make the best move we can for the draw and keep playing. Okay, well, white now has to play f takes g6. Now here, if black plays fg, queen takes g6 is, of course, again a draw. But black really rolls the dice here with king to g7, and this looks like it's sound. But now all of a sudden there's no easy draw anymore, and things get incredibly complicated. All right, queen h7 check is forced, otherwise rook to h8 and white can just resign. King f6. Okay, and now you might want to think about this position. Okay, what should white do here? What does white do to keep hope alive? So the first thing you might want to do is drum up some candidate moves, and then to see from there what exactly ought to be done. And also, of course, you want to see what it is that black can do if given a chance. So how can black try to put an end to this attack? I mean, black is up an entire rook here. Well, sorry, a rook for one pawn. So he can even afford to be a little generous if it means putting an end to the attack. Okay, well, there are two moves I'm going to take a look at here. One is knight to c3. The other is g7. So let's start with knight to c3. All right. If black takes, then bishop takes c3 check, and then rook to f1. You can see that this is really going to be quite dangerous. F takes g6 is probably the best move. Rook f1 check, king e5. And as crazy as it looks, with the king ahead of the rest of his army, at least the non-pawn portion of his army, it seems to be okay, and he's hoping to take the staircase back down through d6 and c7. So white has to find something. Okay, queen to g7 check. And the idea of this is that after king to d6, white plays knight to b5 check, forcing king to d5. And this is really a pretty incredible position. I mean, if you run the engines on this later on, it'll just say 0.00, and it'll keep saying that. And it seems just unbelievably unjust. I mean, impossible. How in the world can black's king be there on d5 and white not have some way to win this? It kind of beggars the imagination. And it took me quite a while, but I was able to prove that white does have some advantage, although I'm not sure if it's enough to win. So there are lots of perpetuals, of course. So a very straightforward one. You might play e4 check, king takes e4, d3, and then just go back and forth on this little seesaw like this. So that's one illustration of the basic mechanism. But I think maybe c4, okay, takes, king d6, here, and now e4. So we kind of do it the other way around. We invert the procedure, and maybe white can win here. Although, again, I'm not sure. So all of this is forced so far. Of course, knight c3, b5 is perpetual once again. But white can maybe play rook to e1 and just try to build up some threats here. So here. Now queen to e4 mate is threatened. So rook f4. And now the big idea is rook takes e6. And it's not that we're winning a pawn, but that we're preventing the king from going back to d6. So now knight to c3 is not just check, it's mating. Knight c3, king d4, rook to e4, rook takes, queen takes mate. So queen e6 is basically forced. Check, and we grab the queen. However, after this, material is basically even. White has a queen and a pawn for two rooks. Definitely black is still worse. I mean, his king is exposed, and his pieces are a little bit loose everywhere. But I don't know that it's enough to win. So one example, okay, takes, d4 check. Here, queen h5. The idea is that if king takes e6, then queen to e2 check. And we grab the rook. So rook f5, queen e2. Knight takes d4. And okay, I mean, can keep making moves from here. Basically, white is somewhat better. Queen and knight are a very potent attacking combination, but it looks as if, well, it's at the very least not clear that white is winning. So still an initiative, some chances, but nothing absolutely clear cut. Okay, this is all very fascinating, but instead of king to d6, the bad news for white, and the reason why we don't have to spend forever on this, is that rook to f6 seems to leave black with a serious, possibly even winning advantage. And the idea is that after rook takes f6, which again seems terrific, d takes c3. So we ignore the rook. We have to because queen takes d7. And now the king drops back to d6 and c7 and so on. And it's only going to be a piece for a pawn, maybe two pawns, but white's compensation really isn't enough. Okay, so going back then, knight c3 is a nice idea, but it's not sufficient. So white played g7. Okay, well, what now? Black has a couple of possibilities here. Most obvious move to play is rook to g8, either now or after g takes h2. And g takes h2 is, I think, the right move. So if rook to g8, the problem with this goes as follows. Queen h6 check. All right, now if king e5, then check, and e4 mate. better to avoid that with king f5, but of course now the king is sitting on the open f file, and now knight to c3 is going to be very effective. Rook f1 mate is threatened. Well, not mate, but mating. For instance, takes, check, here, e4. Okay, it's not mate this time because of this, but now it's mate. All right, so we go back. Instead, we could try bishop to g5. But again, this is just good news for white. I mean, we're basically even in material here. Okay, that's checkmate. And on this, then white is attacking with everything. He's not even down material. So there's no real drama left in this. Okay, white is winning. All right, so rook to g8 is no good. So black took. And now, another interesting position. I think black really only has one move that's worthwhile here, and that's the move played. And you might want to see if you can figure out what it is. So rook to g8 loses the way we looked at last move. That's not going to be any different now. So rook g8, queen h6, and then knight c3 in response to king f5. Okay, but two interesting moves here. Okay, one I think is just right, and that's the move that black played, which was bishop to d6, with the idea of dropping the king back to e7. All right, well, what else? The computer, at least my computer, is kind of fond of king to g5. Now, this move, you know, if I had to look at this position for a million years, I would find it, but it would take me a good proportion of those many years to even consider king to g5. Okay, I guess if I had to analyze every single move, I would find it. But yeah, unbelievably, the computer suggests this. Again, it thinks that this is all 0, 0, 0, but I don't believe it, and I was able to prove that this was not true. So g takes f8 queen. Now, if bishop takes f8, then d3, followed by knight to d2, knight f3, rook comes into play, maybe the bishop goes to c1. The black king will die. Okay, so let's say rook f8. Well, once again, d3, and good things are going to happen, but not for black. So, for instance, f5 to cover the f file, so the king can go back to f6. Knight to d2. Okay, the idea is still to play maybe rook to f1 and knight e4 check at some point. So let's say queen e8, trying to help out. Maybe bring the queen to g6. Well, e takes d4, c d4, and now rook e1. So no immediate rush here. One point of this is that if black were to try something like queen to g6 here, then there's knight f3 check, king f6, and rook takes e6, winning the queen. Okay, so e5, and now check, and now knight takes e5, and this smashes through, and since white's not even down material, this is of course going to win. So here, okay, now white's down a piece for a pawn, but he'll win it back and even finish up a piece and a pawn ahead with second pawn on the way. Okay, so king to g5 is junk. The only good move here is bishop to d6, clearing e7 for the king to retreat. So again, when you're up material, you can afford to think generously. All right, so here white can still force a draw very easily. One way is to play g takes f8, rook f8, and then queen h4 check, preventing the king from running out to e7. Once it goes to the g file, we play queen g4 check or queen g5 check, and just check, 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 check. All right. But white plays e takes d4, keeping it going. C takes d4, and now again, takes, and then either queen h4 check, which we already saw, or even knight to a3 is actually still pretty decent. This is pretty interesting. This should keep roughly equal chances. But white finds an even better move here. So that better move is knight to c3. Okay, well, the idea is obvious, but it's still a pretty remarkable move. We don't give check, we don't take the rook. Instead, we put another piece en pre. Of course, by doing so, we're getting two more pieces into the action. So it certainly makes sense. All right, well, black took. Okay, again, queen h4 check is perpetual, or g takes f8, and then queen h4 is perpetual. Actually, I want to point out one thing. If g takes f8, if bishop f8, this loses. Rook f1, and yeah, you can't play king e7 because rook takes f7 wins everything. And maybe even queen takes f7 is quite strong. And on king e5, then d takes c3 is crushing. And very important to play d takes c3 so that way the d file is open, so black can't get away with king to d6. All right. But of course, rook takes f8, queen h4 is perpetual. All right, so back here. Queen h4 is a draw, g takes f8, and then queen h4 is a draw. But there are two other moves worth considering, at least. Okay, one is the very obvious bishop takes c3 check, but this is bad. The king gets to safety. King e7, queen, recaptures, and black is up a full piece here. All right, let's say bishop to g7, trying maybe to soften up the f7 square, but black can just give back a little bit of material here. And here with two pieces against a rook and his king safe, the pawn on h2 is very good. The d2 pawn is under attack, etc. Black is probably winning here. Definitely much better. Probably winning in the long run. So that leaves only one move here, but it's sufficient. Rook f1 check. All right, king e7 is the only move that makes any sense. Okay, and now, again, if g takes f8, rook takes f8, black is up a piece and should be in good shape. But here was white's idea, g8 queen. All right, well, this looks crushing because if you take, then it looks like just rook f7 is the end. And white has also got some big threats here. He hasn't only queened. He's threatening rook takes f7 check. He's threatening queen takes f7 check. What does black do here? Well, it's, as I said, not rook takes g8 because of rook f7. And if king to e8, then queen takes g8 with mate next move. Or if king to d8, then rook takes queen with check. And this is horrible, absolutely, utterly dead loss for black. But, and this of course had to have been foreseen many moves ago, c takes b2. Who cares? White has two queens. White's threatening to smash on f7. Big deal. So it's incredible, but this holds up. All right. Well, the best move here, you have to figure it out. Do we play rook takes f7? Do we play one queen or the other takes on f7? Maybe, got to ask which one. What should be done here? Maybe something else? After all, we've got two queens and the rook's on f1 covering the b1 square, so maybe we can retreat as well. Okay, well, the best move, I think, is queen g takes f7 check. All right, rook takes f7, rook f7. Okay, again, king to e8 gets mated in two moves. So king d8 is forced. Giving up this queen with check, who cares? So rook takes d7. White is up a lot of material here, but and threatening more, but that pawn on b2 is ready to not only queen, but give mate, actually, at the moment. So king c8. If white pushes the c pawn, the queen on h7 covers the queening square, but then black just queens and then takes the rook with, well, I don't know if it's quite winning, but it's certainly a potentially winning material advantage. So white's best is just to play rook takes d6, allow queening, and of course then you have king h2. All right, so here white has two pawns for the piece, but black's king is obviously looking vulnerable. The rook on a8 is out of play. And black's queen is not really a factor just yet. So black still has to be a bit careful here. So probably the best move here is queen to e1. And the idea is that if white's queen goes over towards black's king, and he tries to just work on the attack, then there's queen h4 e1 as a perpetual check mechanism. All right, well, there are a couple of ways that white can continue from here. Both are good for a draw, but not for more than a draw. So one is queen to g8 check, and let's say we take. So here white's up a couple of pawns, but here black is perpetual, as mentioned, just back and forth on the diagonal. Okay. The other try is queen d7 check, and then rook takes e6. So the rook covers e1. There's no perpetual here. And white has 3 pawns for the piece. But they're not really that far advanced. They're not yet a significant factor. So black is hoping to play king to a7, because rook takes c6 will allow queen e1 h4. I mean, white can block it with the queen on h3, but then takes, and the rook will be hanging on c6. So king a7 is the idea, getting the king out, and really white has nothing, getting the king out of the way and the rook into the game. And here white really has nothing better than something like this. Check, check, and then perpetual. All right, so this remarkable variation looks like best play. In the game, Schroeder played rook takes f7 check, which looks ridiculously obvious and strong, but it's probably losing. Okay, king e8 is forced. We can't allow rook takes queen with check here. Rook f8, bishop f8, queen h to g6 check. Okay, and now king to d8 and king to e7 come to the same thing. King to e7 just makes it take a move longer, so this just forces him back into the same position. All right, so king to c7, and here white has a queen for a rook and a knight. But again, this pawn on b2 is about to queen, so right now black threatens to go up a queen in 2 different ways, or to gain a queen in 2 different ways. One is promoting, one is by grabbing the one on f8. So white saves both with queen to f1. Okay, rook f8, getting the rook into play with gain of time. And I don't see any really good way for white to hold the game. I mean, it takes time for black to win, but I think this b2 pawn is just too much. So I'll show one variation here other than the game. So queen to e1, let's say, e5, c3, so both queens cover b1 now, rook to d8, takes, and okay, position like this, it may seem as if, well, it's clear that white isn't really doing anything too constructive here. I mean, he's not going to win by promoting the g-pawn, but it doesn't really seem as if black is that great here. But in fact, black can win. So knight to e7, which has the idea of knight to d5 and then knight c3 and then queening, is strong. And on c4, the knight switches back to c6. And it's going to make progress in some different ways. So let's say king h3, start running the g-pawn, knight b4. Okay, now if g4, e4 is strong, because if queen takes e4, rook to d3 check, and then black can promote the pawn. Just to demonstrate. And white isn't going to have perpetual, because black can put the king on b6 and then play knight to c6, and that'll take care of just about everything. So instead of that, let's try queen h7 check, king to b6 check, king c5. Okay, if g4 again, rook to d3 cuts off the white queen from b1. So queen b1, knight to d3, and now black is just going to run the e-pawn all the way home. So that's winning. Okay, so back to the game. We were just looking at queen to e1. Okay, instead, queen to g3 check happened, e5, and now queen e1. Okay, queen f5, threatening queen f1 check, which will win, because if white trades queens, then the second queen, or the b pawn promotes, and if instead white plays king h2 after queen f1 check, then rook h8, and in fact black wins. Yeah, that would be quite a funny combination. So yeah, just to show this, just for amusement. So right now, it's kind of funny. White has 2 queens and black has 1. All right, so this is just a ridiculous move just to illustrate. So let's say here, here, here. All right, and now, okay, white loses the first queen. Okay, he loses the second queen, and then black makes another queen. So a pretty radical turnabout in terms of material balance. All right, so here white played queen f3. He's got to block the file. Okay, queen takes c2, threatening b1 queen. If white grabs the rook, there's no perpetual, as we've noted many times already. And so in this position, black's extra piece will carry the day. All right, so queen f to d1, takes, and now we're back to a regular monogamous relationship between white and the rest of his army. Okay, rook f2. And the point of this is he's going to play rook takes d2. All right, so here white played queen e1, takes, king h2, rook c2, threatening rook to c1, and knight to d4. So again, we had a very similar position earlier, and the same idea is at work here. Black wants to play e4, e3, e2, e1, or rook c1, and then e1. So you can either play e1, queen takes, rook c1, and then promote the b pawn, or you play rook c1, give up the b pawn, and promote the e pawn. Either way, black will win. So white played king to g3. So that way on e4, there's king f4. Okay, white would be very, very, very happy to exchange his g pawn for black's e pawn. But black is not going to allow this. King to d6, king g4 here. Okay, now the problem is there's not really anything for white to do that's constructive here. Pretty close to Zugzwang. And in any case, black will play king d5 and e4, and the pawn will promote, will advance anyway. Black will have no worries about white's king. So king g4, this is just last gasp moves here. Okay, now queen h1, rook f2, rook f3, and e3. And here white resigned. There's no perpetual check. So queen h5, rook f5, queen h1, king c5. No more good checks. And now e2 followed by b1 followed by rook to f1, queening. All right, so really a spectacular game, and it's. I'm not sure if I think it's best that white refused the last draw back in this position. So, the cool thing about white not playing queen g takes f7 and finishing with that crazy draw is that we got to see that rook takes f7 is really just losing, because we might have otherwise gotten to a position like this and said, okay, it's unclear. Black has good compensation for the queen. But in fact, even though it's not immediately obvious that this is the case, white is actually losing here. So anyway, a spectacular game. For a long time, just a beautiful balance between attack and defense by both sides. And okay, it's computer chess, but still really, really exciting, a lot of fun. And I hope you guys enjoyed the game as much as I did. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.